I never knew my husband's prized Porsche 911 GT3 could symbolize freedom until I watched it being driven away on a flatbed truck. The buyer's check was already deposited in my new account, one Nathan couldn't touch. Funny how quickly a man who vowed in sickness and in health disappeared when those words were put to the test, yet he still expected his precious car collection to be waiting when he returned. My diagnosis taught me life is too short for broken promises, which is why when he texted asking about his Ferrari, I simply sent back a photo of the empty garage. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I always imagined my life with Nathan would have a fairy tale ending, just in a different kind of castle. Our renovated Victorian in Riverside's historic Oakwood neighborhood was my dream come true. Crown moldings I'd carefully restored, vintage, hardwood floors we'd uncovered beneath layers of old carpet, and a garden room that flooded with morning light perfect for my design sketches. As an interior designer specializing in historic restorations, I'd put my heart into transforming this 1890s beauty into a home that told our story. Nathan and I met at a charity auction for local architectural preservation. I was coordinating the event displays, and he outbid everyone for a private tour of the city's most iconic mansion. Later, he admitted he had zero interest in architecture. He just wanted an excuse to ask me out. That mixture of boldness and charm was irresistible. 6 months later, he proposed in that same mansion, and I said yes without hesitation. For 8 years, we built what I thought was a perfect partnership. Nathan's career at Sterling Financial Group soared, making him the youngest partner in the firm's history. His success funded not only our home renovations, but also his growing passion for collecting cars, each one more expensive than the last. Investment pieces, he called them, though I knew they were really his toys. I didn't mind. His enthusiasm, when showing me the 1967 Mustang Shelby GT500 he'd tracked down in Arizona, was genuinely endearing. The gleam in his eyes when he ran his fingers along the curves of his Ferrari 458 made him look like a boy at Christmas. My own career flourished, too. My reputation for respectful, historically accurate yet livable restorations had earned me a waiting list of clients and features in several design magazines. Nathan jokingly called me the House Whisperer for my ability to uncover the original, character and potential in even the most neglected properties. We were that couple others envied, successful, attractive, still madly in love. Then came the fatigue. At first, I blamed it on our busy schedules and a particularly demanding client project, but when the exhaustion persisted for weeks despite extra sleep, and when unusual bloating and pelvic pain joined in, I finally made an appointment with my doctor. What followed was a whirlwind of tests, specialist consultations, and finally, an anxious wait in Dr. Sharma's office, Nathan's hand clutched tightly in mine. The biopsy results confirm stage 2 ovarian cancer, Dr. Sharma said, her voice gentle, but direct. The good news is we caught it relatively early, and with aggressive treatment, surgery followed by chemotherapy, your prognosis is positive. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Cancer. The word hung between us like an unwelcome intruder. I felt Nathan's hand tighten around mine, then, oddly, loosen. "How long is the treatment?" Nathan asked, his voice strangely businesslike. I glanced at him, surprised by the question. Not, "Will she be okay?" or "What can I do?" but a query about timeline. "We'll want to schedule surgery within the next 2 weeks, Dr. Sharma explained. "Recovery typically takes 4-6 weeks, and then we'll begin chemotherapy, likely 6 cycles over 18 weeks. Nathan was already pulling out his phone, scrolling through his calendar. "The Wellington merger closes in 3 weeks, he muttered, more to himself than to us. Something cold settled in my stomach that had nothing to do with my diagnosis. I turned back to Dr. Sharma, forcing myself to focus on the treatment plan, while Nathan stepped out to make a quick call. By the time we left the hospital, clutching pamphlets and appointment schedules, Nathan had composed himself. He hugged me in the parking lot, promised everything would be fine, then suggested we grab takeout since neither of us felt like cooking. That night, as I lay awake staring at our bedroom ceiling, the elaborate medallion around the vintage chandelier I'd spent weeks restoring by hand, Nathan slept soundly beside me. The space between us, barely inches of Egyptian cotton sheets, suddenly felt vast. I didn't know then that this distance would only grow wider in the coming weeks. The first changes were subtle. Nathan began working later, citing the Wellington merger as requiring extra hours. When he was home, he was distracted, constantly checking emails or making calls in his study. "Setting things up so I can take time off when you have surgery," he explained when I questioned him. I wanted to believe him. My sister Olivia began accompanying me to pre-surgical appointments when Nathan couldn't get away from the office. She noticed his absence immediately, but tried to mask her disapproval for my sake. "Nate's just processing in his own way." I defended weakly after the third appointment he missed. "Some people retreat when they're scared." Olivia's expression said what her words didn't. A real partner doesn't retreat when the going gets tough. The night before my surgery, I found myself alone in our kitchen at 1 a.m., anxiety keeping sleep at bay. The sound of the front door opening startled me. Nathan appeared in the doorway, the faint scent of unfamiliar perfume clinging to his tailored suit. "You're still up," he said, more statement than question. "Surgery tomorrow," I replied, not asking where he'd been or why he smelled like someone else. Some questions feel too dangerous once formed into words. "Right," he nodded, opening the refrigerator and grabbing a bottle of water. "What time do we need to leave?" 6:30, I said. "Dr. Sharma wants me there by 7:30. He took a long drink, then set the bottle on our marble island. "I'll set an alarm." No words of reassurance, no acknowledgement of my fear, just logistics. That night, as he slept beside me, I studied the ceiling again, trying to quiet the voice inside that whispered something was very wrong. More wrong than the cancer growing inside me. The morning of surgery dawned clear and cold. Nathan drove in silence, the radio filling the space where conversation should have been. At the hospital, he helped with the admission paperwork, then settled into a chair in the waiting room, immediately pulling out his laptop. "This will take several hours," I said, watching him set up his mobile office. "You don't have to stay the whole time." Something flashed across his face. Relief? "I've got the Wellington presentation to finish anyway," he replied, not meeting my eyes. "Text me when you're in recovery." Olivia arrived moments later, breathless from rushing. She embraced me tightly, her eyes bright with concern. "I'm so sorry I'm late. Traffic was a nightmare," she said, squeezing my hand. "How are you feeling?" "Scared," I admitted, the word easier to say to her than to my own husband. "That's normal," she reassured me. "But you're strong, Becca. Stronger than you realize." From the corner of my eye, I saw Nathan shift uncomfortably in his chair. "Nathan." Olivia nodded coolly in his direction. "Actually," he began, clearing his throat. "Since you're here now, I might head to the office for a bit. The merger team needs—" "They need what exactly?" Olivia interrupted, her voice sharp. "More than your wife needs you right now?" An uncomfortable silence fell. A nurse appeared, saving Nathan from responding. "We're ready for you, Mrs. Mitchell," she announced. As they wheeled me toward the operating room, I glanced back to see Nathan already packing up his laptop, his expression a mixture of guilt and relief. Olivia walked alongside my gurney until they stopped her at the surgical wing doors, her face showing love for me and barely concealed contempt for the man who should have been in her place. The surgery was successful, the tumor removed completely, though some cancerous cells were found in nearby tissue, confirming the need for chemotherapy. I woke in recovery to find Olivia by my side. Her smile warm despite the worry in her eyes. "Where's Nathan?" I asked, my voice rough from the tube they'd put down my throat during surgery. A shadow crossed her face. "He had to go back to the office. Something about the merger closing tomorrow." Of course he did. The pattern continued. Through my recovery at home, Nathan became a ghost in our house, present in theory, but absent in all the ways that mattered. He hired a home health aide to help me during the day, claiming work demands prevented him from taking time off. The aide, a kind-hearted woman named Maria, provided more emotional support in her 8-hour shifts than Nathan did in his brief appearances. My friend Zoe visited regularly, bringing homemade soups and fresh flowers to brighten our sunroom where I spent most of my recovery days. "Has Nathan taken any time off?" she asked one afternoon, arranging tulips in a crystal vase as I rested, on the chaise longue. "He's very busy," I replied, the excuse sounding hollow even to my own ears. Zoe's expression remained neutral, but her eyes revealed her thoughts. Tom would drag himself to work on a broken leg, but even he took a week off when I had my gallbladder out. I changed the subject. 2 weeks after surgery. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I had my first appointment with Dr. Sharma to discuss chemotherapy. Nathan had a client meeting he couldn't reschedule, so Olivia accompanied me instead. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Dr. Sharma, a petite woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner, laid out my treatment plan. 18 weeks of chemotherapy, 1 session every 3 weeks. "You'll likely lose your hair," she explained gently. "And there may be other side effects, fatigue, nausea, potential fertility impacts." I nodded, trying to absorb it all while fear crept up my spine. "What about work?" I asked, thinking of the historic library renovation project I'd been so excited about before my diagnosis. "Some patients can work part-time during treatment," Dr. Sharma said. "But listen to your body. Pushing yourself too hard can compromise your immune system." Olivia squeezed my hand. "Work can wait. Getting better can't." That evening, I sat Nathan down in our living room to discuss the treatment plan. He listened, nodding occasionally, his eyes darting to his phone whenever it buzzed with notifications. "I'll probably lose my hair," I said, watching his face carefully. "The doctor says there are good wigs available now." "But whatever you need," he interrupted, not unkindly but with the air of someone checking off a task list. "We have good insurance." "It's not just about the wig, Nathan," my voice caught. "I'm scared about how different I'll look, how different I'll feel." He reached across the sofa and patted my hand awkwardly. "You'll still be you." But would I? And would that be enough for him? The question lingered unasked. My first chemotherapy session was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. Nathan had an unavoidable client meeting, so Zoe took me instead. As we sat in the infusion center, the toxic cocktail designed to save my life dripping slowly into my veins, Zoe chatted about everything and nothing, keeping my mind off the poison and what was to come. "Have you thought about a wig?" she asked. "We could make it fun. Try styles you've never dared before. Always wanted to be a redhead? Now's your chance." I smiled despite myself. Maybe something wildly different. Platinum blonde? "You'd rock it," she assured me, then hesitated. "How's Nathan handling everything?" I stared at the IV in my arm. "He's adjusting." Zoe's silence spoke volumes. The side effects hit 3 days later. Violent nausea that left me curled around the toilet bowl, bone-deep fatigue that made even lifting my head from the pillow a Herculean task, and a strange metallic taste that made everything taste like I was licking pennies. Nathan moved permanently into the guest room then. "You need your rest," he insisted, "and I'll just disturb you if I'm getting up for work." A week later, clumps of my chestnut hair began coming out in the shower. I watched the strands circle, the drain, tears mixing with the water streaming down my face. That evening, I asked Nathan to help me shave my head, to take control of at least this one aspect of what was happening to me. "I don't think I can," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Maybe Olivia or Zoe can help." I called Olivia, who came immediately with clippers borrowed from her husband. She sat me in a kitchen chair draped with a sheet and gently, lovingly removed what remained of my hair, telling me how my eyes looked even more striking now, how the shape of my head was actually perfect. When she finished, I studied my reflection in the handheld mirror. A stranger stared back, pale and alien, skull-like without the frame of hair I'd had my entire life. Nathan walked into the kitchen, stopped short at the sight of me, and mumbled something about needing to make a call before retreating to his study. That night, I heard him on the phone through the wall, his voice low but intense. "I can't do this. It's not what I signed up for. She doesn't even look like herself anymore." The words cut deeper than any surgeon's scalpel. 2 days later, I was sitting at the kitchen island attempting to eat plain toast, one of the few things that didn't immediately trigger nausea, when Nathan appeared in the doorway, a suitcase in hand. I need to talk, Becca." I stared. At the suitcase in his hand, the expensive leather weekender we'd bought together during our trip to Italy 3 years earlier. My stomach dropped, not from the chemo this time, but from the unmistakable meaning of packed bags on a Thursday morning. "Talk," I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. "About what?" He set the suitcase down with deliberate care, as if the sound of it hitting our travertine floor might shatter something beyond repair. Perhaps it already had. "This isn't working, Becca," he said, his voice carrying a practiced tone that told me he'd rehearsed this speech. "I've tried, but I can't. I'm not built for this kind of situation." I clutched my bathrobe tighter around my frail body, suddenly aware of how vulnerable I looked. Pale, bald, 15 pounds lighter than when we'd renewed our vows on our 5th anniversary. "What kind of situation?" I asked, though I knew. "The in sickness part of our vows?" He flinched, the first genuine reaction I'd seen from him in weeks. "That's not fair." "Not fair?" I almost laughed. What wasn't fair was the cancer eating away at my body. What wasn't fair was losing my hair, my energy, my sense of taste. What wasn't fair was my husband, the man who had promised to stand by me through anything, now standing before me with a packed bag. "Then explain it to me, Nathan," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. "Help me understand what could possibly be more important than supporting your wife through cancer treatment." He looked at the floor, the wall, the ceiling, anywhere but at me. "I'm not leaving because of your cancer. It's more complicated than that." "Then uncomplicate it for me." He sighed, finally meeting my eyes. "We've been growing apart for a while now, Becca, even before the diagnosis. The merger, the new clients, it all made it easy to ignore, but this situation has forced me to face the truth. I'm not happy. I haven't been for some time." The toast I'd been struggling to eat turned to ash in my mouth. Growing apart? Was that what he called it when one person silently withdraws while the other remains fully committed? And my cancer. Diagnosis was just, what? Convenient timing for you to finally admit it? His jaw tightened. "That's not what I'm saying." "Then what are you saying, Nathan?" Because from where I'm sitting, weak from chemotherapy, fighting for my life, it looks very much like you're abandoning me when I need you most. He ran his hand through his hair, that familiar gesture now infuriating in its familiarity. "I can't be the person you need right now. I've tried, but I just can't. You deserve someone who can support you properly through this. And you've decided that person isn't you. It wasn't a question. I've already talked to Tom about covering my clients, he continued, as if discussing a business transaction rather than the dismantling of our life together. The house is in both our names, so we'll need to figure that out eventually, but I think you should stay here during your treatment. How considerate. He wouldn't make me move while undergoing chemotherapy. Should I be grateful? Where will you go? I asked, hating that I still cared. Tom has a rental property that's vacant. I'll stay there until I figure out next steps. Tom, Zoe's husband, so they knew already. Had everyone in our social circle been discussing my husband's imminent departure while bringing me casseroles and sympathy cards? I stood up, gripping the edge of the counter for support as a wave of dizziness hit me, a common side effect of the chemo, along with the nausea and fatigue. Nathan took a half step forward as if to steady me, then stopped himself. Even now, he couldn't bring himself to touch me. You should sit, he said, concern flickering briefly across his face. You look pale. I'm in chemotherapy, Nathan. Pale is my new normal. The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. Just like being abandoned by my husband is apparently my new normal, too. He winced. I'll continue to support you financially, of course, and I can drive you to appointments if Olivia or your friends aren't available. As if being a chauffeur of last resort somehow mitigated his betrayal. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time saw not the man I'd fallen in love with, but a stranger wearing a familiar face. How had I missed the hardening of his eyes, the coldness that had nothing to do with the blue of his irises? When had his handsome features become so devoid of compassion? I don't want your money, I said quietly, and I certainly don't need your pity rides. What I needed was my husband, but clearly he checked out weeks ago. Nathan picked up his suitcase again, his knuckles white around the handle. I'm sorry, Becca. I truly am. I never wanted to hurt you. And yet here we are. He hesitated as if there were more to say, then nodded once and turned toward the door. I watched him walk away, his shoulders straight, steps unhurried. No dramatic pause at the threshold. No last glance back. Just the quiet click of the front door closing, the period at the end of an 8-year sentence. I sat alone in our kitchen, my kitchen now, surrounded by evidence of a shared life that had apparently meant more to me than to him. The vintage copper pots hanging above the island that we'd found at an estate sale. The espresso machine that had been our 5th anniversary gift to each other. The framed black and white photographs from our honeymoon in Italy that lined the hallway. All of it suddenly felt like props on an abandoned stage, the play having ended while I was still reciting my lines. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at nothing, before the sound of a key in the lock jolted me back to awareness. For one absurd moment, I thought Nathan had returned, had realized the terrible mistake he was making. Instead, Olivia burst through the door, grocery bags in hand, her face flushed from exertion or emotion. I couldn't tell which. That absolute bastard, she spat, dropping the bags on the counter. I passed him on the road. He couldn't even look me in the eye. So she knew. Of course she did. My sister had always seen through Nathan's charm to the selfishness beneath, though she'd kept her opinions mostly to herself out of respect for my choices. He left, I said, the words feeling strange on my tongue, similar to how I have cancer had felt just weeks earlier, new and terrifying realities that my brain struggled to process. Olivia wrapped her arms around me, careful of the tender port in my chest where the chemo drugs entered my bloodstream. I'm so sorry, Becca. So sorry. I felt numb, disconnected from my body. In the moment, he said we've been growing apart, that he's not happy. Olivia pulled back to look at me, her green eyes so like our mother's, blazing with protective fury. What he is a coward, A selfish, spineless coward who doesn't deserve a single one of your tears. But the tears came anyway, hot and fast, the emotional dam breaking now that Nathan was gone, and only my sister remained to witness my collapse. I cried for the marriage I thought I had, for the partner who had promised forever and delivered only until it got difficult, for the future I'd imagined that now lay in ruins at my feet. Olivia held me through it all, murmuring soothing words, her own tears falling onto my non-existent hair. When the sobs finally subsided, leaving me hollow and exhausted, she guided me to the sofa in the living room, tucking a soft blanket around me. "What am I going to do?" I whispered, hating how small my voice sounded. Olivia's expression hardened with determination. "First, you're going to beat cancer. Then you're going to rebuild your life. A better one without that selfish jerk." She squeezed my hand. "And you won't do it alone. I'm here. Zoe's here. We've got you, Becca." "He said Tom knew about him leaving." Olivia nodded grimly. "Tom tried to talk him out of it. So did his boss at Sterling. No one could believe he was actually going through with this." "So everyone had known except me." The realization stung, adding humiliation to the already potent cocktail of grief and betrayal. "I feel so stupid," I admitted. "So blind." "You're not stupid," Olivia insisted fiercely. "You're loyal. You believe in your vows. That's not a character flaw, Becca. It's a strength. Nathan's the one who should be ashamed, not you." I wasn't sure I believed her, but I nodded anyway. The chemo fatigue was creeping up again, making my eyelids heavy and my thoughts sluggish. "Rest," Olivia urged, seeing my exhaustion. "I'll be here when you wake up. I'm not going anywhere." As I drifted into an uneasy sleep, I couldn't help but think how those were exactly the words Nathan should have said, but never did. The days following Nathan's departure blurred together in a haze of chemo side effects and grief. Each morning, I'd wake up reaching for a husband who wasn't there, the cold emptiness of the king-sized bed a cruel reminder of dual losses, my health and my marriage. Olivia stayed with me that first week, sleeping in the guest room Nathan had claimed during my initial treatment. She made sure I ate when food was merely a chore, drove me to my second chemo session, and fielded the endless calls and texts from concerned friends who had heard about Nathan's departure. "No, she's not up for visitors right now," I'd hear, her say in hushed tones from the hallway. Or, "She's resting, but I'll tell her you called." My fierce protector, shielding me from well-meaning but exhausting sympathy. On day 9 of Nathan's absence, yes, I was counting, Zoe appeared at my door with a casserole and an expression that hovered between anger and uncertainty. "I didn't know if you'd want to see me," she said, standing awkwardly on the porch, given that Tom knew. I stepped back to let her in. "You're not responsible for your husband's actions, or mine." Her relief was palpable as she followed me into the kitchen, setting the casserole on the counter. "Tom tried to talk him out of it, Becca. We all did." I turned to face her, suddenly alert. "Who exactly is all?" Zoe looked down, fingers nervously tracing patterns on the marble countertop. "Me, Tom, Mark from Sterling, a few others from your social circle." Nathan had been talking about leaving for weeks. He'd made up his mind, but Tom thought if enough people confronted him, he might reconsider. The betrayal deepened, like a knife twisting in my chest. Weeks. Nathan had been planning his exit for weeks, discussing it with our friends while I fought for my life, oblivious to the social drama unfolding around me. "When?" My voice was surprisingly steady. "When did he first mention leaving?" Zoe's discomfort was visible, but I needed answers more than I needed to spare her feelings. "The night after your diagnosis," she admitted finally. "He called Tom, very upset, said he wasn't equipped to handle this kind of crisis, that your careers had already been creating distance between you." The night after my diagnosis, while I'd lain awake, terrified about surgery and cancer and an uncertain future. My husband had been plotting his escape. Did he mention someone else? The question that had been lurking in the corners of my mind finally pushed its way out. Zoe's eyes widened. What? No. At least not to us. He just kept saying he couldn't handle the stress, that he'd been unhappy for a while, and this was forcing him to face it. She hesitated. Do you think there's someone else? The perfume on his jacket that night before my surgery, the late-night phone calls, the rapid withdrawal of physical affection. All the signs had been there, but I'd been too consumed by my cancer battle to connect them. I don't know, I said honestly, but I intend to find out. That afternoon, after Zoe left, I did something I'd never done in 8 years of marriage. I called Jack Pearson, a private investigator who'd helped one of my clients through a messy divorce last year. We'd kept in loose contact, occasional emails about potential security systems for my historic properties. But this was different. Jack arrived promptly at 4 p.m. the next day, looking much as I remembered, tall and weathered, with observant gray eyes and a quiet demeanor that made people underestimate his intelligence. You look good, Becca, he said as I let him in. The lie was so kind I almost smiled. I did not look good. I looked like a cancer patient whose husband had just abandoned her, gaunt, pale, and bald, beneath the silk scarf Olivia had tied around my head. No, I don't, I replied, leading him to the living room. But thanks for the attempt. He settled into the armchair across from me, his expression turning professional. So you want me to look into your husband's activities? I need to know if there's someone else, Jack. I twisted the wedding ring I still wore out of habit. It won't change the outcome. We're done regardless. But I need the truth. Jack nodded, understanding without judgment. Start from the beginning. When did you first notice changes in his behavior? For the next hour, I laid out the timeline. Nathan's gradual withdrawal after my diagnosis, the late nights, the distance, the perfume, all culminating in his departure 9 days earlier. Jack took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions in his methodical way. What about joint finances? He asked. Any unusual withdrawals or transfers before he left? I hadn't even thought to check. Cancer and chemo had consumed all my attention, leaving little energy for financial vigilance. I don't know. We have separate accounts for personal expenses, but a joint account for household costs and investments. You should look into that right away, Jack advised. Even if he's not involved with someone else, people planning to leave marriages often start moving assets. The suggestion sent a chill through me. Would Nathan have gone that far? Stolen from me while I was fighting cancer? After Jack left, with Nathan's photo and a list of his usual haunts, I dragged my laptop to the sofa and logged into our online banking accounts. What I found made my blood run cold. Over the past month, Nathan had been systematically transferring money from our joint account to his personal account. Small amounts that wouldn't immediately raise flags, but which added up to nearly $50,000. More disturbingly, he'd liquidated his portion of our investment portfolio just 3 days before leaving, withdrawing almost $300,000 without a word to me. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the transaction history. This wasn't just abandonment. It was calculated, financial betrayal. He'd been planning his escape route while sitting beside my hospital bed. I called Olivia immediately. I need a lawyer, I said when she answered. A good one. Specifically, a divorce attorney who won't be intimidated by Nathan's legal connections. What happened? Her concern was immediate. He's been moving money, Olivia. Lots of it. While I was throwing up from chemo and losing my hair, my husband was emptying our accounts. Her stream of creative profanity would have made a sailor blush. When she finally calmed down, she said, I know someone. Diana Winters. She specializes in high-conflict divorces, and she's absolutely ruthless when the situation calls for it. Perfect. Set it up as soon as possible. 2 days later, I sat in Diana Winter's sleek downtown office, surrounded by the trappings of legal success. Law degrees from prestigious universities, awards for excellence, photographs with well-known judges. Diana herself was a formidable presence, mid-50s, impeccably dressed, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Mrs. Mitchell, I've reviewed your financial records and preliminary information," she began, her voice brisk but not unkind. "What your husband has done is not just morally reprehensible, it's legally actionable." I gripped the armrests of my chair. "Can we get the money back?" "We can certainly try. The timing works in our favor. Courts don't look kindly on spouses who drain accounts immediately before leaving, especially when the other spouse is seriously ill." She leaned forward. "But there's something else you should know. Something my paralegal discovered while doing background research on your husband." My stomach tightened with dread. "What is it?" Diana slid a folder across her desk. Inside was a printout of a luxury car storage facility membership in Miami. Next to it, a receipt for 6 months of climate-controlled storage space, large enough for multiple vehicles. "Your husband reserved specialized car storage in Miami 3 weeks ago, shortly after your diagnosis. The reservation was completed and paid for the day before he left you." The room seemed to tilt sideways as the implications sank in. "He's planning to move his cars to Florida? But those cars are here, in my garage and at Collector's Haven." "Precisely," Diana said grimly, "which suggests he intends to return for them. Cars of that value aren't something he'd simply abandon, especially given the financial steps he's already taken." As I left her office, my phone buzzed with a text from Jack. "Found something. Need to meet in person. Your house, 7 p.m. The hours until 7 p.m. crawled by with excruciating slowness. When Jack finally arrived, his typically calm expression was troubled. "You should sit down for this, Becca." I sank onto the sofa, bracing myself. "Just tell me." Jack pulled out his tablet and opened a photo gallery. I followed Nathan for the past few days. His routine was fairly consistent. Sterling. Financial, the gym, Tom's rental property where he's staying. But yesterday, he drove to this address. He showed me a photo of an upscale apartment building downtown that I recognized as having been completed about a year earlier. He went up to the 15th floor and stayed for 3 hours. Jack swiped to the next image, this one showing Nathan, embracing a willowy blonde woman in the building's lobby. Her name is Vanessa Collins. She's a junior associate at Prestige Design Group. The air left my lungs in a painful rush. Vanessa, my friend. The same Vanessa who had sent me a thinking of you text just last week. The same Vanessa who had attended our anniversary party 6 months ago, who had helped me select fabrics for our sunroom renovation last year. There's more, Jack said gently, swiping to additional photos showing Nathan and Vanessa holding hands, at a restaurant, walking arm in arm through a park, kissing in the front seat of his car. How long? I managed to ask, though my throat felt lined with broken glass. Based on what I could gather from the building's doorman, who's quite chatty, they've been seeing each other for at least 7 months. 7 months, half a year, of lies, of betrayal. Not just by my husband, but by a woman I'd considered a friend. A woman who had looked me in the eye day after day, offering professional collaboration and personal friendship while sleeping with my husband behind my back. The dual betrayal was almost too much to bear. I leaned forward, suddenly unable to catch my breath, the room spinning around me. Becca! Jack's voice seemed to come from very far away. Becca, I'm calling an ambulance. As consciousness slipped away, my last coherent thought was that perhaps the cancer wasn't the thing trying hardest to kill me after all. The hospital ceiling came into focus slowly, the fluorescent lights too harsh for my pounding head. The steady beep of monitoring. Equipment provided a rhythmic backdrop to my confusion. Why was I here? The last thing I remembered was sitting in my living room with Jack, looking at photos of Nathan and Vanessa. The memory hit me with physical force, making me gasp. A nurse appeared in my field of vision, her expression professionally concerned. "Mrs. Mitchell, you're at Memorial Hospital. You collapsed at home. Your friend called an ambulance." I tried to speak, but my throat felt raw. The nurse offered a plastic cup of water with a straw, holding it while I took small sips. "What happened?" I finally managed. "Your blood pressure dropped dangerously low, and you were severely dehydrated. The oncology team has been consulted given your ongoing treatment." She adjusted something on my IV line. "Dr. Sharma will be in shortly." I closed my eyes, processing. The physical collapse was almost a relief compared to the emotional one that had preceded it. My husband and my friend together for months while I battled cancer. The door opened, and Olivia burst in, her face tight with worry. "Becca, thank God you're awake. Jack called me. He's in the waiting room. What happened?" As the words spilled out, Nathan's affair with Vanessa, the financial betrayal, the secret storage space in Miami, Olivia's expression morphed from concern to white-hot fury. "That absolute monster," she hissed, gripping the bed rail so tightly, her knuckles went white. "Both of them. After everything you've been through." "Mrs. Mitchell." Dr. Sharma entered, chart in hand, her normally warm manner slightly rigid. "You've given us quite a scare." The examination was brief but thorough, the verdict unsurprising. Extreme stress combined with chemotherapy side effects and poor nutrition had created a perfect storm. My immune system, already compromised by treatment, couldn't handle the additional burden of emotional trauma. "We need to consider adjusting your treatment plan," Dr. Sharma said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Your body can't fight cancer effectively under these conditions." "I can't stop chemo," I protested weakly. "The cancer won't wait for my personal life to improve." No one's suggesting stopping treatment entirely, but perhaps a modified protocol, additional supportive medications. She paused, choosing her words carefully. "And I'm going to strongly recommend psychological support. Cancer is hard enough without additional stressors." Additional stressors, such a clinical term for having your life exploded from multiple directions simultaneously. After Dr. Sharma left, Olivia helped me sit up, adjusting pillows behind my back. "You're coming to stay with me when they discharge you," she announced. "No arguments. I can't impose." The hospital kept me for 3 days, pumping me full of fluids and nutrients, monitoring my heart function, and adjusting my medications. My oncologist consulted with specialists, developing a modified chemotherapy regimen that would hopefully be easier on my depleted system while still effectively fighting the cancer. Nathan didn't call, didn't visit, didn't even send a message asking if I was all right. His absence spoke volumes about how completely he had detached himself from my life and well-being. Vanessa, on the other hand, had the audacity to send flowers, a tasteful arrangement of lilies with a card expressing concern and hopes for my speedy recovery. No mention of her betrayal, no acknowledgement of her role in my collapse. Olivia intercepted the delivery, read the card, and promptly dumped the entire arrangement in the hospital trash. "You don't need her fake sympathy," my sister said when I asked about the commotion I'd heard in the hallway. "Not now, not ever." On the afternoon of my 3rd day in the hospital, Diana Winters appeared in my room, briefcase in hand, looking as impeccable as she had in her office despite the institutional setting. "I don't typically make hospital visits," she said, pulling a chair close to my bed. "But given the circumstances, I thought you should know right away. We've filed for an emergency freeze on all your joint accounts and investments. A judge granted the order this morning. For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of something other than despair, a small spark of satisfaction. So Nathan can't take any more money? Not from your joint assets, no. And we've initiated proceedings to recover what he's already transferred. She opened her briefcase, removing a slim folder. But that's not the only reason I'm here. My investigative team has been looking into the Miami car storage situation. We needed to determine his intentions, especially since those vehicles represent significant assets. I steeled myself. And? The storage facility is high-end, specialized climate control, 24-hour security, the works. It's the kind of place collectors use when they're relocating valuable vehicles. Diana's expression was grim but satisfied. My contact at the facility confirmed that Nathan has arranged for transport of multiple vehicles, scheduled for next week. Something cold settled in my stomach. He's planning to move his entire collection without even discussing it with me? It appears so. The transport company has paperwork for 8 vehicles. She consulted her notes. A Porsche 911 GT3, Ferrari 458 Italia, Mercedes AMG GT, 1967 Mustang Shelby GT 500, Aston Martin DB11, 1970, Dodge Challenger RT, Lamborghini Huracan, and BMW M4 Competition. I knew each car intimately, had listened to Nathan extol their virtues, had accompanied him to auctions and dealerships, had even helped pick the color for the BMW, his most recent acquisition just 6 months ago. That's his entire collection, I said, the magnitude of his planned theft dawning on me. Those cars are worth approximately $4 million based on current market valuations, Diana finished for me. And here's where it gets interesting from a legal perspective. According to our research, 4 of those vehicles, the Ferrari, the Shelby, the Aston Martin, and the Lamborghini, were purchased during your marriage with funds from joint accounts. My mind raced, connecting the dots. So, legally, I have a claim to them? You have a claim to at least half their value, possibly more given the circumstances of your separation. Diana's smile was sharp. The timing of his planned transport works in our favor. It demonstrates intent to remove marital assets across state lines without disclosure or agreement. What can we do? We've already filed for a temporary restraining order preventing removal of the vehicles. The hearing is tomorrow. She closed her folder with precision. In the meantime, focus on your health, Mrs. Mitchell. Let me handle the legal battle. After she left, I lay back against the pillows, trying to process everything. Beyond the obvious financial implications, what struck me most deeply was the calculated nature of Nathan's actions. He had planned his escape down to the last detail, arranging for his precious cars to join him in his new life while I fought cancer alone. Part of me wanted to curl into a ball and disappear, to let the weight of betrayal and illness crush me completely. It would be easier than fighting cancer, fighting Nathan, fighting for what was rightfully mine. But another part of me, a part I barely recognized, simmered with something new. Not just anger, though there was plenty of that. Something cooler, more focused, a determination that had nothing to do with saving my marriage and everything to do with saving myself. When Olivia came to take me to her home the following day, she found me sitting up, dressed, a calm expression on my face. "You seem different," she observed as she helped me into her car. I gazed out at the hospital where I'd received my cancer diagnosis, where I'd learned of my husband's betrayal with my friend, where I'd begun to forge a new version of myself from the ashes of the old. "I am different," I replied. "I'm not just fighting cancer anymore, Olivia. I'm fighting for my future. All of it." She glanced at me as she pulled into traffic. Should Nathan be worried? For the first time in weeks, I smiled. A small, determined curve of my lips that held no warmth but plenty of purpose. Nathan should be terrified. He just doesn't know it yet. Olivia's guest room became my sanctuary during the weeks that followed. Her modest craftsman home couldn't have been more different from the historic Victorian I'd shared with Nathan. Warm earth tones instead of cool marble, cozy furnishings that invited relaxation rather than showcasing design trends. There was something healing about the very ordinariness of the space. My modified chemotherapy regimen was still brutal, but marginally more manageable. The anti-nausea medications worked better, and the treatment schedule allowed more recovery time between sessions. Small victories, but I clung to them. 3 weeks after my hospital stay, Diana called with unexpected news. The judge had not only granted our restraining order preventing Nathan from moving his cars, but had also issued a temporary order placing all vehicles under my control pending final divorce proceedings. What exactly does that mean? I asked, trying to grasp the implications. It means you have legal authority over those vehicles right now. You can access them, move them, even sell them if necessary, provided you keep proper documentation of any transactions for the court. The possibilities unfurled before me. Nathan must be livid. His attorney called mine 15 minutes after the ruling. Apparently, your husband was in the middle of arranging transport when he received notice. He's demanding an emergency hearing to overturn the decision. Will he get it? Unlikely. The judge was not impressed with his financial maneuvers, or his timing in leaving a seriously ill spouse. Diana paused. This is a significant victory, Mrs. Mitchell. It changes the power dynamic considerably. After ending the call, I sat in Olivia's sunlit kitchen, turning over this new development in my mind. The cars had always been Nathan's pride and joy, his symbols of success and status. Now they were under my control. Tangible assets I could leverage in the divorce, yes, but also something more. A reclaiming of power in a situation where I'd felt powerless for too long. That evening, I asked Olivia to drive me to Collector's Haven, the storage facility where Nathan kept his most valuable cars, the Ferrari, Lamborghini, Aston Martin, and the vintage Shelby. The facility manager, a car enthusiast named Phil who'd always treated me as an afterthought during Nathan's previous visits, now approached with careful deference, the court order clearly having preceded my arrival. Mrs. Mitchell, he nodded, unlocking the climate-controlled room that housed the 4 gleaming vehicles. Everything is as Mr. Mitchell left it. No one has accessed the cars since the order was served. I walked slowly around each vehicle, running my fingers along the sleek metal curves, remembering Nathan's excitement when acquiring each one. The Ferrari's vibrant red paint, the Lamborghini's aggressive stance, the Shelby's classic American muscle, the Aston Martin's refined elegance. Each represented a different facet of the man I thought I knew. I'll need access codes and keys. For all vehicles, I said to Phil, my voice calm and authoritative despite the churning in my stomach. And I'd like to review the maintenance records. If Phil was surprised by my request, his professional training hid it well. Of course. Mrs. Mitchell, I'll prepare everything immediately. Back at Olivia's, I began researching high-end car dealerships and auction houses, making notes about market values and potential buyers for vintage and luxury vehicles. My sister watched with a mixture of concern and admiration. Are you really going to sell his cars? She asked as I compiled spreadsheets comparing different sales approaches. Not all of them, I replied, not looking up from my laptop. Not yet. But I'm going to make sure they serve a purpose beyond stroking Nathan's ego. The next morning, I received 2 calls in quick succession. The first was from Dr. Sharma with unexpectedly positive news. My latest blood work showed encouraging responses to the modified treatment protocol. My body was fighting back more effectively than anticipated. This doesn't mean we can relax our approach, she cautioned, but it's a very good sign. Your resilience is impressive, Mrs. Mitchell. The second call came from Jack Pearson with information of a different sort. He'd continued monitoring Nathan's activities at my request, focusing particularly on financial movements and communications with Vanessa. "He's getting desperate," Jack reported. "Since the court froze the accounts and put the cars under your control, he's been making calls to everyone he knows trying to secure loans. Most are turning him down. And Vanessa? Their relationship appears strained. They've had several public arguments, including one where she told him, and I quote, 'You promised this wouldn't affect my career.' End quote. I processed this information with a strange detachment. Any indication of what she meant? Not specifically, but my contact at Prestige Design says rumors are circulating that she used client information to help your husband make investment decisions. Nothing proven, but there's smoke. Inside trading, of course. Nathan's sudden investment successes over the past 6 months had seemed too good to be true. Now I understood why. He'd been using Vanessa's access to confidential client information at her design firm, which often worked with high-net-worth individuals discussing their homes and, inevitably, their business plans. "Keep watching them," I instructed Jack, "especially any financial transactions. I want to know exactly how deep this goes." That afternoon, I met with a specialist from Elite Automotive Auctions, a distinguished older gentleman named Howard, who treated the cars with reverence while explaining my options with refreshing clarity. "The Shelby is the true collector's piece here," he noted as we toured Collector's Haven. "Given its provenance and condition, it could fetch $850,000 to $950,000 at a properly marketed auction. The Ferrari and Lamborghini are depreciating assets, but still highly desirable. The Aston Martin holds its value better than most in its class." "How quickly could we move forward?" I asked. Howard studied me carefully. "For the modern cars, we could arrange private sales within weeks. For the Shelby, an auction would yield the best price, but that would take at least 2 months of preparation." I considered my options, weighing financial needs against strategic timing. Let's begin with the Ferrari. It was always his favorite. 2 days later, I received notification that Nathan had filed an emergency petition claiming I had no right to sell his cars. Diana called me immediately. "This was expected," she assured me. "He's panicking. The good news is that the judge denied his petition. The temporary order stands. You can proceed with any sales as long as the funds remain in escrow until the final divorce settlement." That same evening, Nathan finally reached out directly through a text message. "We need to talk about the cars. This has gone too far." I stared at the message for a long time, remembering all the unanswered texts I'd sent during those first terrible weeks of treatment. The questions about appointments he'd missed. The pleas for emotional support that had gone ignored. After careful consideration, I replied with a single sentence. "All communication should go through our attorneys." 3 minutes later, my phone rang. Nathan's number. I let it go to voicemail. His message was a mixture of anger and forced reasonableness. "Becca, this is ridiculous. Those cars are my property, my passion. You don't even care about them. This vindictive streak isn't like you. Just call me back so we can discuss this rationally." I deleted the message without responding. The Ferrari sold first to a tech entrepreneur from Seattle who paid $315,000, slightly above market value because he wanted it immediately. I watched it being loaded onto the transport truck, remembering how Nathan had spent hours polishing its glossy surface, how he'd named it Rosso because he thought calling it red was too obvious. When the truck pulled away, I felt no remorse, only a curious lightness. The funds went into the escrow account as ordered by the court, but the knowledge that Nathan's prized possession was gone, that his carefully curated collection was being dismantled, carried its own satisfaction. The Lamborghini followed 2 weeks later, selling to a professional athlete for $290,000. I didn't attend that transport, focused instead on my latest round of chemotherapy and the promising scan results that followed. For the first time since my diagnosis, Dr. Sharma used the phrase "responding exceptionally well" to describe my condition. "Is it going away?" I asked, hardly daring to hope. "The tumor markers have decreased significantly, and the affected tissues are showing marked improvement," she explained, her typically reserved expression warming. "We need to complete the full treatment course, but yes, essentially, your body is winning this battle." I wondered if she knew how much I needed to hear exactly those words. Your body is winning. After months of feeling betrayed by both my husband and my own cells, the idea that part of me was fighting back successfully gave me strength for the battles still ahead. The next day, I instructed Howard to begin the auction preparations for the Shelby. Nathan's reaction was swift and predictable, a barrage of increasingly desperate messages left with Diana, culminating in an unexpected appearance at Olivia's house while I was resting after treatment. My sister, ever protective, refused to let him pass the front porch. Their voices carried through the open window to where I lay on the guest room bed. "She's destroying everything I care about," Nathan's voice cracked with what sounded like genuine distress. "Those cars are my life's work." "Funny," Olivia's tone was ice cold. "I thought marriage vows were supposed to be a life's work, especially the in sickness and in health part you so conveniently forgot." "You don't understand. It wasn't that simple. I couldn't handle seeing her like that. So sick, so different. I made mistakes, I admit that, but this revenge campaign is excessive. The Ferrari was irreplaceable." "Unlike a wife with cancer who's apparently quite replaceable," Olivia shot back. "Leave now, Nathan, before I call the police. Any communication goes through the attorneys. Becca's made that clear." When his car pulled away, Olivia came to check on me, her face tight with controlled anger. "You heard?" she asked, sitting gently on the edge of the bed. I nodded. Every word. "Are you okay?" I considered the question seriously. Was I okay? The cancer was responding to treatment. The divorce was proceeding in my favor. The car sales were giving me financial security independent of Nathan. Yet beneath these practical victories lay a deeper question about emotional healing. "I'm getting there," I said finally. "Each day I feel a little more like myself. A new self, maybe, but still me." Olivia squeezed my hand. "He looks terrible, if that helps. Unshaven, hair a mess, dark circles under his eyes." "It doesn't help," I admitted. "But it doesn't hurt either. I just feel distant from it all, like I'm watching someone else's drama unfold." This emotional detachment served me well during the weeks that followed. The Aston Martin sold to a collector in Chicago. The BMW and Mercedes, stored at our house and technically still under Nathan's daily use, were relocated to secured storage by court order after Diana presented evidence that he was planning to move them despite the restraining order. Through Jack's continued surveillance, I learned that Vanessa had ended her relationship with Nathan, concerned about potential professional repercussions as rumors about inappropriate use of client information spread through her firm. Nathan had moved from Tom's rental to a small apartment, his financial resources dwindling as legal fees mounted and his access to our joint assets remained restricted. Meanwhile, I was growing stronger. My hair had begun to return, soft fuzz at first. Then a surprisingly chic pixie of darker hair where my chestnut waves had once been. I'd regained some weight, my face looking less gaunt, my energy levels improving between treatments. Working remotely with a few select design clients provided mental stimulation and a welcome connection to my professional identity. The Shelby auction was scheduled for a Saturday in early spring, coinciding with my final chemotherapy session. The timing felt symbolic, an ending and a new beginning wrapped together. As we left the infusion center after that last treatment, Olivia handed me her iPad. "They're live streaming the auction," she explained. "Thought you might want to watch." We sat in her car in the hospital parking lot, watching as Howard presented the gleaming vintage Mustang to an audience of serious collectors. The bidding started at $750,000 and quickly escalated. paddles rising across the elegant auction room. $800,000, $825,000, $850,000. The auctioneer's rhythmic chant continued as the price climbed steadily higher. "Do you think Nathan's watching this?" Olivia asked quietly. "I'm sure he is," I replied, oddly calm as I watched the last of his automotive treasures being sold to the highest bidder. The gavel finally fell at $920,000, at the high end of Howard's estimate and well above Nathan's original purchase price 5 years earlier. As applause rippled through the auction room, I felt a curious sense of completion. "It's done," I said, looking up from the screen to the spring sunshine filtering through the car windows. All of it. The chemo. The car sales. One chapter closed. The full circle moment came 3 days later, when Diana called with news that changed everything. "The SEC has opened an investigation into Nathan and Vanessa for securities fraud," she reported, her voice vibrating with suppressed excitement. Apparently, they used confidential client information from Prestige Design to make trades ahead of market-moving announcements. The evidence is substantial. They weren't exactly subtle in covering their tracks. "How serious is this?" I asked. "Very. They're facing potential criminal charges alongside civil penalties. Given the amounts involved, Nathan could be looking at significant jail time." I absorbed this information with a strange blend of vindication and detachment. Nathan's true character had been revealed not just to me, but to the world, not through my accusations, but through his own actions. "There's more," Diana continued. "Given these developments, Nathan's attorney has approached us about an expedited divorce settlement. They're offering full concession to all our terms: the house, the remaining investment accounts, no alimony claims in either direction. They want this resolved quickly before the SEC investigation further complicates matters." "They're hoping a clean divorce will help his case?" "Precisely. Also, the cars are no longer a contested issue since they've already been sold. The proceeds remain in escrow, but our position that you're entitled to at least half their value is now essentially unchallenged." I considered this unexpected development. "What do you recommend?" "Take it," Diana said without hesitation. "This is the best outcome we could have hoped for. A clean break on favorable terms without a protracted legal battle. You can finally move forward." Moving forward. The phrase resonated deeply. Wasn't that what I'd been working toward all along? Not vengeance for its own sake, but liberation from a marriage that had revealed itself as hollow, from a husband who had failed the most basic test of commitment. "Tell them yes," I decided. "Let's end this chapter completely." The divorce was finalized 2 weeks later with minimal paperwork and no courtroom appearance. I signed the documents in Diana's office, my hand steady as I legally reclaimed my former name, Rebecca Morgan, shedding the last vestige of my connection to Nathan. That evening, as I sat on Olivia's porch watching the sunset, my phone chimed with an email notification. The escrow account had released the car sale proceeds, transferring $1, $7 million to my newly established personal account. Financial independence. Secured in a single electronic transaction. "What now?" Olivia asked, joining me with 2 glasses of sparkling cider, alcohol still being contraindicated with my medication. I took a sip, savoring the crisp bubbles. "Now I start over. Dr. Sharma says my prognosis is excellent. The scans are clear, though I'll need regular checkups for the next 5 years." "Will you go back to the Victorian?" I considered the question. The house had been my dream once, a showcase for my design talent, and the backdrop for what I'd thought would be a lifetime of happiness with Nathan. Now it held too many memories, both beautiful and painful. "No," I decided. "I'm going to sell it. Use the proceeds and some of the car money to buy something smaller. Maybe that craftsman cottage we saw in the historic district last month. The rest I'll invest for the future and donate a portion to cancer research." Olivia smiled. A fresh start. Exactly. I lifted my glass in a toast. To fresh starts. And to discovering what we're made of, even if we have to learn it the hard way. 6 months later, I stood in the light-filled living room of my new home. A lovingly restored 1920s craftsman with original woodwork and leaded glass windows. My hair had grown into a stylish bob, darker than before, but suiting my new sense of self. My body had recovered much of its strength, though a certain weariness still lingered after extended activity, a reminder of battles fought and won. A text message from Diana interrupted my contemplation of where to place my favorite reading chair. Thought you'd want to know. Nathan pleaded guilty to securities fraud charges today. Sentenced to 4 years, eligible for parole in 2. Vanessa. Got 18 months. I read the message twice, searching for the emotion I expected to feel. Satisfaction, perhaps, or vindication. Instead, I found only a quiet acknowledgement that justice takes many forms, arriving in its own time and way. I set down my phone without replying and returned to arranging my furniture, creating a space that reflected who I was now. A survivor. In multiple senses. A woman who had faced devastation and emerged not just alive but stronger, clearer about what mattered and what didn't. The most expensive piece in my new, more modest home was a painting I'd commissioned from a local artist, an abstract that captured the journey from darkness to light, from confusion to clarity. It hung in the entry hall where I would see it. Every time I returned home, a reminder that sometimes we must lose everything to discover what can never be taken away. Our courage, our resilience, our capacity to begin again. That evening, I sat on my new front porch swing, watching the neighborhood children play on the sidewalk as dusk settled gently around us. A young couple walked by hand in hand, and I smiled at their obvious happiness, feeling neither envy nor bitterness. Their story was their own, as mine was mine. Complex, unpredictable, still unfolding. My phone rang. Olivia checking in, as she did most evenings. "How's the settling in going?" "Good," I replied, looking around at my peaceful surroundings. "Really good. I think I'm finally home. Not the home I'd planned or expected, but the one I'd built myself, piece by careful piece, from the ruins of what came before." And in the gentle spring evening, with health returned and peace hard won, that felt like victory enough. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.